Sure,
once
sure.
again and maybe visit you. I have been to Hyderabad many years ago.
Okay,
It was very
okay.
nice.
We would love to host you physically sometime.
Hopefully, this COVID will vanish soon and we'll have occasion to meet either
Right,
in India or elsewhere around the world.
right. And before we start officially, I would like to thank you for accepting our invitation to be the speaker today. Thank you so much.
My pleasure. Thank you very much.
So, should we wait, sir, for 2-3 minutes then start?
Yes,
We'll wait
no
for
problem.
a minute. We'll wait for a minute and then we'll start. We'll start on time.
Yes, thank you.
A couple of minutes. Yeah.
Let me share the links on my Facebook, maybe.
So, do we start, sir?
Yes, we can.
Okay. So, a very good afternoon to all of you, the conference delegates, session chairs, participants, and my colleagues at IBS. I'm going to introduce somebody who needs no introduction, especially in the area of corporate finance. So we have with us Professor Sabri Boubaker, and I'm extremely thankful to him for accepting our invitation to be the speaker at this hour. And I mean, it's a great privilege for us to have him with us today. So, but for the sake of the introduction to all our participants, I would like to read his brief profile. So I don't know whether this profile of him would do justice to his reputation, because he's somebody who is beyond listing profile and introducing to people. But then for the sake of it, I'll do it. Professor Sabri is a professor of finance at EM Normandy Business School in Paris, France. He has published many academic papers. By many, I mean more than 100 articles in international refereed journals, including the Journal of Corporate Finance, Journal of Banking and Finance, Journal of International Money and Finance, Financial Management, Journal of Business Ethics, Journal of Financial Economic Dynamics and Control, Auditing, a Journal of Theory and Practice, and British Journal of Management. See, we do not need to go back and explore these journals. Many of them feature in FT 50. So I'm not talking about any ABDC or ABS classification here. These are the journals which define finance. So Professor Boubaker has also edited 12 books on corporate finance, corporate governance, and corporate social responsibility. He serves on the editorial boards of many academic journals such as British Journal of Management, Journal of International Financial Markets, Institutions and Money, in which he is the subject editor. He is the subject editor in Emerging Markets Review, Economic Modeling, Finance Research Letters. He serves as the associate editor, International Journal of Emerging Markets, associate editor, Research in International Business and Finance, associate editor, and then he's the co-editor of the Journal of Economic Asymmetries and Business Ethics, the Environment and Responsibility associate editor. Professor Sabri is the co-founder and the co-chair of the annual Paris Financial Management Conference and the Vietnam Symposium in Banking and Finance. We welcome you, Professor, and you have the next 45 minutes to you, and we would look forward to have a great talk in terms of what makes papers publishable in top-tier finance journal. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you very much. Thank you, Satish, for your nice and introduction, and thank you for the invitation for this outstanding conference. So let me first start by sharing my screen, and please feel free to stop me at any moment, especially to give me a signal that the call is about to end. So thank you very much. I will make today a presentation on what makes papers publishable in top-tier journals. But let me start with a good news that I would like to share with you is that I will be the upcoming editor of Journal of International Accounting and Financial Management starting from next March. So this is a good journal with an impact factor of 1.8. It is oriented to corporate finance, corporate governance, and financial management. So I look forward to reading your contribution, guys, to this journal. This is a Wiley journal that used to be the journal of the New York University. So I will not continue with my editorial board position since you have made this in the introduction, and I will go directly to what makes papers publishable, and this is an overview of what I will be talking about. So how to find, first of all, a hot research idea to target in a journal, which is something that is extremely important, and the first step to be able to publish in a good journal is to have this hot research idea. This is the first point that I will focus on. Secondly, what makes this idea promising? Because we have many research idea that comes to minds of people, but not all of them are really promising. And then the content of a journal paper, what should be in some papers, where I am receiving, and many editors are receiving many papers on a daily basis, but many of them get desk rejected or they face a lengthy reviewing process. So the question is, what makes some papers, let's say, finding easy path to publication while others will suffer? This is so what we'll do it, and finally we'll finish by some tips, like some tips for writing and writing precautions. So first of all, what motivates us to publish in top-tier journal? First of all, to be a better quality, we need to publish better research. And nowadays we have some internal drivers that pushes us to publish. The first one is our personal interest, personal achievement. We need to get promoted. We have some ambitions, but also some external drivers that are shared by almost all of us, including we need a degree, we need, let's say, better career, we need to show our quality to our colleagues, and we have some self-fulfillment, but also we have some peer pressure that is now more important than any days are in the past. So pressure is getting more and more important to publish. If we don't publish in many schools, we have to more or less to exit, and this is something that is more important. And the publication process, it is something that is not easy because we get peer reviewed, and peer reviewed makes the process, let's say, the quality of the process, let's say, better, to make sure that papers that are published that are sound, that are that we can replicate, that are reliable, that use great quality data, and they are, let's say, done using scientific method, and especially in terms of replication. Okay, this is what I will go back on it. So why should I work on hot topics? Because look, there are dozens of journals in finance, in accounting, and economics. But why should we work on hot topic? First of all, publication in top-tier journals is a way to build our international human capital reputation, and to show that we are able to make this quality research. And usually it is a pedigree that is intangible, first of all, and this pedigree can quickly disappear if we are unable to make these publication, and usually only a journals count. Okay, so that's why the objective is always to aim high and to accept low. So target high journals is something that is very important, even if It is not always successful, but starting at the beginning, the aim should be to target these high quality journals. And usually for promotions, A journals are the most important ones. Publication in B journal only will count actually if they are backed by A journals. But it's very difficult to get promoted in many countries around the world if we have only B journals. So my idea is, or what I suggest, is to always aim high and to accept low. So why should I work on hot topics? Because first of all, when you are working on a hot topic and you have an idea with a life cycle, all idea have life cycles like products. So when you are at the beginning of the life cycle of an idea, you can make sure that your papers will be impactful, they will be highly cited. This will lead to leading indication that your publication are quality, including Google Scholars. And you have seen better than me that the recent COVID wave had pushed many researchers to work on COVID and the different implication of COVID on finance, firms' outcomes, firms' resiliency, and all those papers have been highly cited in 1 year. Some papers have been cited between 300 and 600 times in 1 year, which is something amazing in a short period of time. So this is something important. So and there is also, when you send paper to top tier journals, you receive feedback. Whatever the paper is rejected or you have an revise and resubmit, you always learn, and you learn from top tier scholars who will give you, let's say, more insightful comments. So what makes paper great? First of all, it has to contain a clear, useful, and exciting scientific message. You have your story should be new but clear, impactful, and exciting. And the idea should flow in a logical manner that readers can follow. Okay, so it has to be smooth. It has to be formatted to best showcase the material of the paper and to best showcase that what you are studying worth investigation. And it has to be written also in a style that is clear. By reading top tier papers, you will get used with the style that has to be in your paper. Okay, so the question is, what is hot and what's not in research? This is most important, and how you will be able to detect these hot topics, and how you are able also to know which trends are those that are the most welcomed by researcher. To detect this, you need to be aware of what is presented in recent conferences, and you need to think about how to select research problem. So a good research largely depends on the selected problem. So when you select a good research problem, you have more chances to publish in top tier journals, irrespective of your work. If you have a low quality research question, even if you spend time and use, let's say, relevant empirical tools, this may be not enough because this topic is not, let's say, a hot topic that is considered worthy publication in that time. Some research topic may be used to be very important. For example, if you publish now a topic working on, let's say, the forecasting of corporate bankruptcy, even if you are using a sophisticated tool, a recent tool, you are not able to publish because this topic was, let's say, up to date, maybe in the early 70s. Nowadays, even if you are, let's say, putting a new empirical tool that you have developed yourself, it's very difficult to publish in top tier journals. So good research idea depends 90% on, let's say, the idea that you have detected at the beginning, and a good idea, usually it is difficult to find. So this is not something easy, especially that at any moment, many people around the world think of the same idea, and researchers on finance are numerous around the world, especially in the recent years with let's say, the easy access to internet. So the question is how to select this idea, how to find it, and how to make sure that it is a significant idea that can make a significant contribution to the literature. And as you can know better than me nowadays, there are too many papers published in a given topic per year. Even if you focus on and you narrow your research field, working, for example, only on corporate governance, and within corporate governance, you work only on editorial boards, or you work only on boards of directors, even that you have a huge number of papers that are published every year in different countries. So many papers are from traditional research country, US, UK, and so on, but many papers are now from emerging markets, China, Hong Kong, India, Singapore, South Korea. So this was not the case, let's say 20 years ago. Now we have a huge research quantity. This makes also that we are pushed to implement research and idea in a quick fashion. We cannot, let's say, spend long period working on research idea. We are under pressure more than ever before. So at the same time, many people think of the same idea, and the life cycle of the research idea nowadays is shorter than even before. Okay, I remember, let's say in the late 90s, early 2000s, you can work on an idea for 3-4 years. You can have 3-4 research paper on the same, more or less, a new let's say research topic. Nowadays, you don't have time for that. You need to pick one idea to work quickly on it. Other people around the world working on the same topic. Okay, and now we have many requirements for one paper. Okay, endless robustness tests and endless additional analysis also, and especially this endogeneity now is a thankless exercise. The more you do, the more referees will ask. And as you can see now, papers are getting lengthy, and many journals are asking to have internet appendices because they cannot publish all potential robustness tests that are asked by the referees. Some papers, if you include the text, the tables, the additional analysis, they are close to 100 pages, which is something that was unexpected 20 or 25 years ago. Many databases nowadays are needed at the same time in one paper. Execution period needs to be shorter as even before. So many things. So the question is how to find this idea. First of all, when you know the research field you are working on, you have to identify leading research group in your field. You have to find their research topic focus, what they are working on, and you have to follow top-tier conferences around the world. This is something extremely important. If you are in finance, you need to follow top-tier research conferences to top-tier researchers. You need to be aware of what they are doing. Okay, which conferences they are attending, what are their papers, what they are working on. You need to follow also research in top-tier journals, let's say FT 50, or let's say 4 and 4-star ABS ranked journal. You need also to follow research from top school journals. And also, if you have a Twitter account, you need to follow, for example, what are the tweets of, let's say, top stars, financial analysts, top researchers, but also you need to follow the trend, because many ideas we can get them from some practical issues. Okay, I will not spend time, but for me, these are some of the top tier finance conferences. Nowadays, also, there are more and more finance conferences. Many of them are top tier conferences. So you need to be aware. Maybe you need to get in, let's say, subscribe in their emailing list, and to try to follow what is new on the research topic. So this is, let's say, a list of top tier finance conferences, but these are also additional very good finance conferences also that I suggest that you subscribe to their mailing list and to be aware of their programs. Many of them are, let's say, made on a yearly basis. Some of them have stopped during the COVID, but now hopefully the COVID will vanish and we'll see more these conferences, let's say, resuming their activities. But also I suggest that you follow researchers in your field who are editors on top journals, because these, let's say, scholars are aware of what is needed, what is, let's say, what the demand for research, because for research there is offer and demand, and they know that what is needed now. So follow editors of top tier journals, associate editors, not all of them, of course, those that are working on in your field, subject editors also of top tier journals, famous keynote speakers who are usually in top tier even in second-tier conferences, and predictive researchers, those who are, let's say, prolific in terms of publication. You have to follow them in your field. Try to follow this person. Maybe they are something between, let's say, 15 to 20 persons in your particular field. You have to follow these persons, okay? Influencers, researchers also in top-tier journals. So if you would like to have an idea on top-tier journals, these are top journals that are ranked in the UT Dallas, okay? So you can example, the ABS ranking by 4 or 5. If you are in accounting, you follow the top 4 or 5 and so on. Okay, very good. So what are the key ingredients actually for a top research idea? What are the key ingredients? So the first important thing is that one major contribution is better than many small ones. This is something extremely important. So in your paper, try to have one important contribution. Don't show, let's say that you have 3 or 4 minor ones. Let's try and focus on one major contribution that you have to emphasize, that you have to show its importance, okay? So what is the contribution type? There are different kinds of contribution type. It can be a new theory, testing a new relationship, testing an existing relationship, but showing a new channel that links X to Y. You can test an existing relationship in a new environment, but showing how this new environment can shape differently your research idea. You can have a new setting, new data, new variable, new econometrics, but make sure that what you are bringing new is substantial. Taking an existing research idea, running it without any modification on the Indian context, showing that your results are consistent with those on the US, does not bring any incremental in a substantial way, any incremental contribution in a substantial way. So you have to identify, describe, and demonstrate the big idea, and you need to ask the right problem, because asking the right problem will lead you to have the right answer. And keep in mind that what is important is your contribution and how significant is your contribution to the literature review. So impact is something that is the most important, and you need to be aware of this. Okay, so my advice is usually aim high and accept low. If the paper getting rejected, there is no problem. At least you have tried to target these good journals. You will have top tier feedback, and this feedback will be extremely useful for you to build, let's say, your way of thinking and your way of designing papers. So use research question selection as an example. So do not patch small holes, let's say, that are left by existing researcher. Find a key research question which may have a long unpack. And if unfortunately you are not successful, accept low, okay, and you will get advices from professors, colleagues, reviewers, and you will build, let's say, your experience based on that, okay? And when you work on a paper, try to have this analogy between a paper and a product. So when you are developing a new product in the market, okay, usually the first step is research and development. The equivalent when you are working on a paper is brainstorming to have an idea, compare potential product with the competition, because you will sell a new product. When you are working on a research paper, compare the contribution with existing literature to differentiate your work compared to existing literature. Inputs from suppliers are really needed in your product to be able to have the production and the packaging. In a research idea, you need data collection, empirical part, and writing. Writing is your packaging. Advertising, you need to advertise the product in the market. In a research paper, you need to show your paper and to present it in seminars, conferences. Distribution and return on investment for the product for your paper is publishing, and the return on investment are citation, promotion, prestige, and so on. So this analogy is very important to show you how things are closely similar, at least in spirit. Okay, so what is the life cycle of a research idea? And this is something that we need to be aware of. And that's why I ask usually my PhD students to work on one idea at the same time to be able to deliver in a quick fashion. Because in the 80s or in the 90s, on average, a life cycle of a research idea used to be 10 years. If you remember better than me, people have been working on the determinant of capital structure for many, many years. Now an idea, the life cycle has been reduced because of the larger number of researchers and also for the means. Now we have powerful softwares, we have, let's say, ready-click databases and so on. In the 2000, let's say, consider that it was over 6 years. Now, let's say in the recent years, it is something that is between 12 and 18 months. So one first paper that appears tackling a new idea, 12 to 18 months later, all, let's say, related idea would be available as working papers on SSRN and different other websites. So more researcher now, more secondary data, more databases, more sophisticated tools, and more authors also on one paper. The average number of authors on one paper nowadays is by far larger than in the 80s. In the 80s, you see more papers with 1 and 2 authors. Now you see more papers with 3 and 4 authors. This is something that is reducing significantly the time authors are spending on a paper to be able to deliver quickly. So maybe you know this from internet. So what was needed in, let's say, 20 years ago was to publish. Then either you publish or you perish. Now, then it was published, but you had to publish in highly impactful journal. Now you have to publish in highly impactful journals, to publish more in highly impactful journals, and maybe you will be able to survive due to the competition that is more important than even before. Okay, so let me focus on on the introduction of your paper. When you write the paper, what you should have among other. Okay, this is not a comprehensive list of what you should. First of all, you need to, when you write the paper, you need to start from general to specific, and it is very important to show that there is some anecdotal evidence that backs your idea. You need to show that your idea is something hot, not only for academics, but also for investors, for shareholders, for policymakers, for, let's say, all those who are protagonists in the economic or finance sphere. Check whether your topic has been dealt with in press, in media, whether it has been, whether you are able to have quotes of famous people, and you need to have some supporting figures and statistics. This is something very important to allow you to show that your research idea is really hot. And also, you need to dedicate one paragraph that position your paper to prior academic literature, many paragraphs if needed. If your paper contributes to different research fields, you need to detail your contribution in the introduction. This is something extremely important, and it should be done in a detailed manner. And your introduction also should summarize your results. So this is more or less what should be in the introduction, following this order. And let's say all research paper, if you check the introduction in top-tier journal, they are written in the same way. Okay, this is what should be done in the paper. But what you should also think about is the channel. If you are linking X to Y, you need to show how X is related to Y. You don't only establish the relationship and you say, okay, I have done, my job is done. No, it's not enough. You need to check the channel. For example, if you are working on board gender diversity and you are showing that having a diversified in terms of gender, having diversified boards, this will increase firm value. You need to show how it is increasing it. Okay, is it increasing firm value because these firms are implementing more R&D, because these firms are taking more risk, because these firms are more innovating? What are the channel? Let's say, what gender diversification is bringing to the company? What these female directors, if you are working on gender diversity, or let's say different people with different backgrounds, what they bring new? What is the new blood? What they are doing? Is it in terms of risk, innovation? reducing agency problem, reducing information asymmetry. So you need to test these channels. Okay, your job is not something that ends with the first table by establishing the relationship. Okay, so theory here is needed, it is a must, but also you have to bring also, as I have said earlier, anecdotal evidence, which is welcomed, but this could be something that is not enough if you bring only that. Okay, so can we assess the reliability of the idea? This is something else that is extremely important, because in many journals we need to show that your study could be replicated. Okay, can we assess also the reliability of econometrics? And this is something that is extremely important, because when you are using econometric tools, you are making joint tests. You are testing the hypothesis, but you are testing the let's say the relevance of the econometric tools, and you are testing also the quality of the data. So these are joint tests, and what you need to do, you need to make some robustness tests that show that your econometric tool is the appropriate one for that empirical design, for that empirical paper, and you need to show also that there is no particular, let's say, data that is affecting your results. For example, your results are not due, for example, let's say, to firms that cross-list in the US, or it is not due to firms that are working or concentrated, let's say, in the capital of the country, or let's say in a specific area, working in a specific area, and so on and so forth. You need also sometimes to use qualitative approaches and interview to supplement your data. Many journals are asking also this as an additional robustness. This is what we call triangulation. More than one method to collect the data on the same topic is needed also. So what should we have, let's say, in the empirical part? Usually you need to have this descriptive statistics. Descriptive statistics are very important because they allow us to see how is distributed your dependent variable, your variable of interest. You need to think of the correlation matrix. The correlation matrix is useful to assess and to assess whether there is multicollinearity or not. You are familiar with this. I will not spend time, but you need to think whether you have to show this correlation matrix with or without your dependent variable. Bivariate analysis, usually it is important, but not, let's say, crucial, because this depends on the results. Sometimes your results from a multiple regression could be different from those of bivariate analysis, because the relationship can be nonlinear, or you can have other variables that intervene with mediating, or let's say mediating roles. So main tables, one regression cannot answer more than one hypothesis. This is something else that you need to be aware of. Many times we receive papers with only one regression or only one table of regression with that answers more than one hypothesis. No, you cannot make it. Okay, you need more tables to answer more hypotheses, and this is something that is important. Okay, sorry. Okay, yeah. So you should also in a paper show that the results do not depend on the dependent variable. If you are testing, for example, the effect of ownership structure on firm value, you cannot use only Tobin skew as a proxy of firm value. So you need to have more than one proxy of the dependent variable to show that your results are not driven by the dependent variable. Also, your variable of interest, you need to use also more than one proxy for your variable of interest, because you need to show that it does not depend on that particular proxy. So the results are not driven by that particular proxy. Also, alternative estimation techniques. Okay, you can run on OLS, but usually OLS is not enough because it has its own assumption. Okay, any econometric tool has its own assumption, and maybe those assumptions are driving the results. So we need to show that it is not the case. So it is not, let's say, it is not this assumption or that econometric technique that is driving your results. Also, additional control variables, because nowadays, if you consider, for example, studying ownership structure on firm value, if you assess the literature, you will find that there are dozens of potential determinants of firm value, and you cannot control for everything in your regression. So usually you have omitted variables. You have some kinds of omitted variables that you can control for, others that you cannot control for. So you need to think of this very, let's say, acute problem in corporate finance, accounting, and economics, which is omitted variable bias that is a source of homogeneity, and you have to tackle this with care, including by adding additional control variables, okay, one by one in your sample. Sometimes also you need to think of alternative sample composition, because maybe you have a large proportion of firms that are listed in the US in your sample, a large proportion of widely held firms, a large proportion of firms working in a given industry. So you are always afraid that the of companies that are driving your risk. X affects Y, but in many cases, the other way around is possible. And you can have a situation when Y affected X, for example. Okay. For example, you are studying the effect of ownership structure on firm value, and you show that concentrated ownership increases firm value, but higher firm value may encourage also owners to hold more shares. So in this case, is it X that affects Y or Y that affects X? And here you need to run some robustness tests to check whether your results hold for this problem of reverse causality. So you can use, for example, the 2-stage squares or 3-stage squares and so on. So this omitted variable is very important to check whether your error is a white noise or not. There are a lot of precautions that I can spend time in explaining them in addressing homogeneity, but okay, you can use different methods, instrumental variable approach, propensity score matching, diff and diff. I will spend some time and show them in a couple of slides. But also what you need to think about in a paper is whether your results are, people's readers can interpret them in more than one way. This is something extremely important, okay? Because you can provide one explanation, but there are other explanations at the same time. And in this case, either you show that potential explanations are possible, or you rule out these potential explanations, okay? So using econometric tools, okay, using some cross-sectional tests, you need to show whether there is one unique interpretation of your results, or there are more than one interpretation potential of your results, okay? And the most important thing that is now, let's say, really important in research is what are the channels? What are the channels that drive the relationship between your variable of interest and your dependent variable? And are you able to test these channels also or not? If you are able to test the channel, this will brings more confidence in your results. Okay, and of course, in many times, you need to present also some additional analysis that can bet your results. For example, if you show that higher ownership concentration increases firm value, it would be great to show that at the same time, it reduces the cost of equity, it reduces the cost of debt, for example, and it reduces also the agency problem related in that company. So these additional results, if they are consistent with your primary result, they are extremely important because they will back your interpretation of your key result. Okay, another, let's say, point that is very important and shows that your research idea is important is that whether your paper has tension or has no tension. Then let me explain. Okay, for example, imagine that you are studying board gender diversity and risk-taking, and you show that your theoretical reasoning will bring that board gender diversity decreases firm risk-taking. And there is only this possibility. In this case, you have no tension. You are testing something that is not an empirical, let's say, issue. We don't have an a priori, let's say, uncertainty regarding the result, okay? So either we have no result, or we have a decreasing, no relationship, or we have a decreasing relationship. However, when you have a tension, means that a possible relationship is, a positive relationship is possible, but also a negative relationship is possible. In this case, you have a significant contribution. For example, in this case, you are testing both potential hypotheses, and you have reasoning and theoretical rationale that board diversity increases firm value, but also board diversity decreases firm value. If this topic is, let's say, recent, it is a hot topic, it is better to be in the second situation rather than in the first situation, because your empirical research is more needed, because you are testing two opposite hypotheses, and there is, let's say, a priori no, let's say, clear theoretical relationship between both. So it is more an empirical issue, and only the empirical analysis can help you to detect whether this result holds or not. Okay. So let me give some example, for example, of this tension. For example, let's see, for example, the relationship between product market competition and analysts following. So this means that if a firm is operating in a highly competitive market, this can increase analysts following, the number of analysts that follow a firm, and that can decrease. Here we have both arguments in favor of the first relationship and arguments in favor of the second relationship. Okay, and the first argument are based on information asymmetry hypothesis. The second one is based on monitoring and disciplinary hypothesis. And when you are in this situation where both relationships that are in opposite ways are available, in this case, the contribution is substantially more important than when you have only one direction. Okay, unidirectional hypothesis is less, let's say, important in terms of marginal contribution to the literature compared to the situation when you have both cases. Okay. Okay. And in this case, when you have the results, for example, product market competition affects negatively, for example, analyst following, you need to think about alternative interpretation. For example, let's say product market competition will come with disclosure of less information if you are in highly competitive industry, so less incentive for analysts to follow a company due to higher costs. So this is offer side. There is also demand side. In this case, sometimes you find yourself in a mess and you need to show how you can be able to roll out some alternative interpretation. And in many analyses also, you find yourself that what you are testing is an equilibrium situation between offer and demand. If you are studying, let's say, the number of analysts that follow a firm, you are studying leverage, you are studying debt maturity, you are studying the choice between bank debt and bond debt, and you have that, for example, leverage, there is offer and demand, there is a demand side and offer side. You have banks, you have companies. So what you are observing is an equilibrium situation. So this situation have to be handled with care, and you need to make your analysis from the offer side and from the demand side. Okay. Always, my suggestion is to have alternative proxies for dependent variable. I have mentioned this earlier. I want to spend time on it. Alternative proxies of key and dependent variable. Also, alternative sample composition, excluding utilities, excluding cross-listed firms, widely held firms, and so on. Okay, and also you can analyze your results using different sample period. Of course, you need to have some reasoning behind that. For example, before the crisis, after the crisis, excluding a crisis period, before tariff reduction, after tariff reduction, because, for example, in this case, we study product market competition. So tariff reduction is an exogenous shock actually to this competition. Satish, how much time do I have?
Around 5 to 6 minutes more, sir.
Excellent. That's perfect. Thank you very much. Yeah. Other econometric problems that are really important is, for example, the self-selection bias. Usually when you are, let's say, shaping your sample, selecting your sample, you need to think of this self-selection bias. For example, if you exclude any category of companies, make sure that this will not bring self-selection bias. For example, let's say you are working on companies that disclose a given information in their annual reports, okay, and you are taking only the subsample of firms that are disclosing that particular information in their annual report and excluding others. You need to compare excluded company to others, and you check whether there is a self-selection bias or not. If there is a self-selection bias, you need to make a correction, and correction is using Heckman two-step procedure by using the inverse Mills ratio. This is something really important. You can also use a propensity score matching technique. For example, if you are studying firms that disclose and not disclose information, you need to check whether there are confounding effects that affect both your variable of interest and your dependent variable. So they are creating, let's say, endogeneity due to these confounding effects. So econometrics is something really important nowadays in corporate finance, and being able to use these econometric tools in the right way is something really important. So endogeneity, what are the sources of endogeneity, which is something that you have to take care of whether you are working in management, in accounting, in finance, and in economics, is there are different sources, including measurement errors, reverse causality, omitted variables. You don't have one solution, you have more than one solution, but none of them is enough. And usually we are constrained to use more than one solution in a paper, making paper lengthy and lengthy. First step is to use additional control variables that have been proven in the literature, in prior literature, that are relevant in explaining your dependent variable. You need to use also potential methods. There is no one exclusive way. Fixed effect models, IV approach, two-stage least squares, three-stage difference, GMM, system GMM, research regression, discontinuity design with their various categories, diff in diff regression, natural experiments when you are using shocks. So there is no one unique method, and usually more than one method is needed actually to be able to tackle these problems. So for example, if you are studying product market competition of shocks, you can have tariff reduction in one country, for example, or in one industry. You can use, for example, removal of product specific quota following China entry into the World Trade Organization in 2001, but you need to have this date in the middle of your sample to be able to do that. By checking recent literature in top-tier journal, you will get familiar with these shocks that are really important to make your paper reaches the level of these top-tier journals. And of course, when you run a diff and diff regression, for example, there are precautions. So any econometric tool that you are using has its own assumption, and you need to be aware of the tests that have to be used, okay, to make sure that that tool is used and it is appropriate for your data and for your specification. So this is something that is really important. Additional analysis are really important. We need to know, for example, when the relationship that you are testing is more exacerbated, is mitigated, when it is weaker, when it is stronger. This could be done using subsample analysis, dividing the sample, for example, depending on whether the companies are operating using good governance, weak governance, whether the company are distressed firms versus sound firms. And this is something really important, okay, to have these additional analysis to show that you are able to go beyond the main hypothesis and to, let's say, dig deeper to check the quality of the results. Another point that is really important in your paper, you need to ask yourself, okay, I have established this relationship, but so what? This relationship is important to whom? Okay, for example, if you are working on product market competition and you are showing that this relationship affects negatively analysts following, and this is a substitution effect. So if this argument holds, okay, and product market competition leads to less analysts following the firm, you need to find also, and you need to check this relationship with short-term debt, because you are showing more analysts. So product market competition makes company under pressure, better monitoring, better external monitoring, so less need for financial analysts to follow the firm. If you establish this first relationship and you show that there is substitution effect, you need to observe, okay, whether product market competition leads to less monitoring by short-term debt, less monitoring by long-term debt, for example, less monitoring by bank debt. So this is something important because short-term debt provides more monitoring, bank debt provides more monitoring compared to bond debt. So these are the additional analysis that usually are needed. Maybe a couple of slides before ending. So also you need to think of your dependent variable. Is it the result of a single decision? For example, when you are studying earning management, this is a single decision. However, if you are studying hedging, the dependent variable, the extent of hedging is the result of two decisions. The first one is to hedge or not to hedge. The second one, if you hedge, to which extent. So in this case, maybe you have to use Tobit, maybe you have to use a Krag model depending on the situation. Also, you need to think whether your variables is firm level, industry level, or country level, because depending on your variable, the analysis should be different. Also, the results of your decision. You need to check also in the analysis, who is taking the decision? Okay, if product market competition leads to less financial analysis, or if product market competition is leading, let's say, to less short-term debt, who is taking the decision? Is it a firm decision? Is it a bank decision? Is it a market decision? Is it an analyst decision? The reasoning should not be the same. Okay, and you need to make sure that there is a correspondence between your independent variable and dependent variable, whether both are firm level or not firm level. If one is country level or industry level, the other one is firm level. You need to be aware of this. Okay, let me stop here. Thank you very much for your attention, and I welcome all your questions.
Thank you, Professor Boubaker, for a wonderful presentation. And let me tell you, if you look at the chat window, people are going crazy. And they're heaping huge praise on you, the way the presentation was planned, the way you put the content, and the way you have given so much of information as to how to write in a good journal. I think people must be getting excited to ask you more questions. I'll start inviting the questions from them. We have Antima Sharma. Please go ahead, madam.
Hello, good afternoon, sir.
Good afternoon.
I have a question. Sir, I am a research scholar and I am at data collection stages. I have formed a research regression equation to achieve my objective. In a regression equation, I have a dependent variable, one independent variable, and some control variables. So my question is that, what is the selection criteria to include some control variables in our regression equation?
Okay, thank you, Antima. The criteria of selection of control variable usually are the most common ones used in existing research. Okay, if you are working on any given topic, check recent top-tier journals. What are the most common determinant control variables, and others, you will have many others that are used. They should be as additional control variable. Usually there is a problem. What is the appropriate, let's say, or the optimal number of control variable? There is no fixed rule. Usually depends on the literature, depends on the topic itself. But when you are following sound papers, let's say, that are published in top-tier journals, adopt the same, let's say, bundle of dependent of, let's say, control variable, but use other variables that have been shown important and relevant in the literature as additional control variable. So following one top-tier paper answers your question. Having these control variable from that paper and other control variables could be used, let's say, as a control variable. So if you can see, usually you have firm size, growth opportunities depending on the topic, let's say firm risk as main control variables, but other papers can use independent, for example, directors board size as additional control variable. So this is my advice. When you follow top-tier journals, you will find that more or less they use the same control variables. Okay, that's why it is very, very important to be on that way of behaving. Is it okay, Antima?
Yes, sir. Thank you very much. Okay, if I want to
My
extend my question, that just for example, I have taken how corporate governance can affect the reliability of fair value information. I have taken that presence of women in the board of directors can also affect the reliability of information. That, or I am taking the women board of director as one of my control variable. Then is it okay, or my way is okay to take control variables in my study this way, which I have adopted?
Antima, the connection is not good. I don't know whether have you understood her question, Satish? Or could you please repeat it in a clear and shorter way?
Antima,
Yes,
can you please write your question in the chat box. In the meanwhile, we take it from others.
Yes, please.
Okay.
Sir, people are asking if you could share the presentation with them.
Yes, my pleasure. I will share it later on.
Thank you. So there is a question from one of the audience. They're asking, what is your take on how to suggest, select a good moderator in the relationship?
Very good question. First of all, it depends why you need this moderator. Usually, I don't advise running a new paper. For example, studying, let's say, the effect of product market competition on leverage, the moderating role of. Usually, these kind of paper cannot reach a top-tier journal, okay? But this could be in the analysis. Usually, the moderator should be something that either shows a channel, okay? For example, you are running an interaction effect, for example, with proxies for corporate governance, proxies for the extent of agency costs or the extent of information asymmetry. So this should allow you to test potential channel, or to test when the relationship is more exacerbated, less exacerbated, based on sound reasoning. You cannot use any kind of moderation or mediating relationship. So you need to have some sound reasoning underlying this. For example, if you are testing a relationship with product market competition and leverage, it would be relevant to test whether this relationship depends or not on the financial distress costs, for example. Okay, but you cannot use any analysis without sound reasoning. So the econometrics and the choice of the moderating variable should help us, let's say, detect relationships that are supporting theory, and this should not be more a data mining, let's say, exercise when you are just, let's say, spying the data. No, it should not be like that.
Thank you, Professor. Do we have, I can take one more question, then we have to start the next session, please. Anyone else with a question?
Professor Rajesh Pathak has raised his hand.
Yes, Professor Rajesh.
Yes,
Professor
have you seen
Sabri.
the question of, hi.
Thank you very much for very insightful session. I was listening and really got benefited from several points that you raised. I have one question. When you talked about the ingredient for a full-length paper, these days we have several papers or several journals publishing papers in letter format. And I was wondering how the ingredients of a paper change without compromising on the quality to get it placed into a letter format journal. So what's your view, how things, or maybe what are some of the things that we should keep in mind to get our paper there in a letter format? I would really appreciate your views.
Thank you very much. This is really not easy question, because usually you have to balance the length of the paper and what is required in the paper. If you are submitting a paper, let's say, to econometric letters, to finance research letters, or any other journals, for example, let's say you are submitting your paper to Journal of Accounting and Public Policy, and the letter format, you need to be very careful. Many times these journals now, if you check, they are asking for an internet appendix with longer tables, okay, with more tables. So you can see a short draft of 14 pages, 2,500 words, but you will see more and more footnotes saying we have done this and this and this, and you find everything in the internet appendix, because the first version usually is a version that is more linked to the requirement of the journal, for example. And however, referees will ask for more tests, and my advice is to have an internet appendix to fit in that. This is my advice, but usually you need to balance this. Okay, what makes your paper publishable, but what makes you also make the referees confident in your results. And all depends on the topic, but in corporate finance, corporate governance, accounting, usually we have more tables than what is required by the journal, but referees make the process lengthy, asking for many things. I have seen many cases when you have reports that are even longer than the paper. Recently, I have submitted a paper to a letter, very nice paper talking about a very recent topic. Believe me, the reports have been longer than the paper itself. Okay, and they are asking many new and additional tests. We need to do them, but they will be unfortunately in an internet appendix. So when you click on the paper, you will have them. I will put this internet appendix on SSRN, but we cannot do without that. So my suggestion is to adopt this internet appendix.
Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
As good was your session, better was your question and answer session, and we kindly appreciate your, the way you have handled the questions and answered all the questions to their, satisfaction. Now I would request Professor D. Satish to please say a few words.
Yeah, on behalf of IBS Hyderabad, Professor Sabri, it was let me thank you for this wonderful and very insightful talk on getting published at the top journals. You have touched upon some of the very important things like the time span reducing, having a hot idea, trying to get the things moving within 12 to 18 months, and also all alternatives right from the variables, the dependent, the independent, alternative samples, things like that. I'm sure it is though some of them the people are aware, but I think you put it in a real nice way, and that is where people would be asking for your slides. And we expect to form a long relationship with you. We hope to have perhaps we can start off this summer with some sessions from you to all our faculty members if you're free and available. And also after the COVID goes, perhaps it'd be a great honor for us to invite you to our campus here at Hyderabad. Thank you very much, Professor.
My pleasure. Thank you very much for inviting me, and I look forward to strengthening our collaboration. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you.
Take care and stay safe, and all the best for your outstanding conference. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Have a good day, sir. Have a good day. Thank you.
Have a good day. Thank you. Bye-bye.